Choosing a Fujifilm recipe can be an actual pain. There's so many out there. In this video, I'm going to share 5 of my recent favorites, give example photos, and tell you when they work best. But before we do, let's do some disclaimers. I didn't create any of the recipes in this video, and all the creators will be linked in the description below. Creating those recipes takes a lot of time and hard work, so please show them some support. I also want to mention that all the photos in this video were either shot on the Fujifilm X100V or the Fujifilm X-T5. Now, depending on the sensor of your camera, you may have some settings or others. Don't worry, a lot of these recipes have different versions depending on what camera you're using, and if they don't, I encourage you to plug the recipe in and just ignore the settings you don't have. You can often get similar looks or a new interesting look you may create by doing this. With that, let's move on to the first recipe. Absolute Portra. There are a lot of Portra recipes out there, but Absolute Portra has quickly become my favorite. Unlike many Portra recipes that end up looking overly warm and way too yellow and green, Absolute Portra plays that line perfectly, still giving off that warm Portra look, but not overdoing it. I would call this recipe an everyday recipe with the caveat that it doesn't work great indoors and it looks a little different on overcast days due to the daylight white balance setting. In every other situation, I found this recipe works great. I really enjoyed the way the shadows and highlights rolled off, making for a really pleasing transition between different areas of contrast. Like many Portra recipes, this one doesn't have a ton of contrast, so I did find myself adding a bit more to the JPEG in post. I really found myself using this recipe for a mix of street photography and travel, perfect for achieving a really clean looking image that feels a bit more special than a normal JPEG. Before moving on, I can't remember if I mentioned it or not, but this is the 10th video in this series, which means there are 9 other videos just like this one with tons of great recipes in the description below. I've reviewed over 40 recipes at this point, so there are a lot of great ones to choose from. So check them out if you're looking for more recipes, and there's more videos just like this one to come. Let's get back to it. Urban Dreams. If you're looking for a perfect recipe for city photography on an overcast day, then this one's for you. This recipe has a cooler look, leaning more into the blues thanks to the auto white balance with the +2 blue setting, which helps create a more moody look. It's also a great recipe if you're looking for a fairly even look with contrast that doesn't feel overbearing, largely due to the DR400 setting as well as the subtle highlight and shadow adjustments. If you do want a bit more contrast, underexpose a bit to help get those blacks to pop in the image. I had a blast using this recipe around New York City, and while I'm not sure it'd be great outside of urban environments, I can say for sure that this recipe really deserves its name, creating a look that, while not always feeling true to life, does make your image feel dreamy. Kodak Gold 200. Based off the very popular Kodak Gold film stock, Kodak Gold 200 is perfect for that retro film aesthetic. The -1.5 highlight adjustment helps keep your highlights from blowing out completely while still giving enough brightness to not feel super flat, and the +0.5 shadow adjustments make sure there's always a little bit of detail in the shadows. When it comes to color, this recipe, like the Absolute Portra recipe, uses a daylight white balance with a stronger shift in the reds though, making for a warmer look and giving a bit more of that yellowish shift. While I'm not a huge fan of the yellow shift, I find it works well for this recipe, especially if you're shooting during the fall months. I particularly enjoyed using this recipe with a flash to help create that disposable camera point. If you're really after that film look and that retro film vibe, look no further than Kodak Gold 200. Anybody's Black and White. This is the only black and white recipe on this list, and it's a special one because it comes from someone I've talked to for years on Instagram, Gio, also known as AnybodyShoot. He's got a YouTube channel, so I figured I'd let him take it away and explain what makes this recipe so special. So take it away, Gio.
What's up, guys? Thanks for having me, Ben. I appreciate it. So to jump right into it, Anybody's Black and White. If you know my channel, if you've seen me online, if you've seen any of my socials, you know that I am a very strong proponent of shooting in black and white. I have a dedicated monochrome camera. I've been shooting monochrome Leica for the past year almost exclusively, and this year I decided I wanted to switch up my workflow and use some of my Fuji cameras again. So I went on a mission to create my own black and white recipe that would somewhat mimic my Leica workflow, and I have been very happy with it so far. I've taken out in several locations and shot it under several lighting conditions, and I think it's pretty versatile. I will say it's a bit punchy on the contrast, so if you do decide to use it, you can lower it a little bit, or you can kind of tweak the highlights to however you like it. I like my work to be a little bit punchier than most. I don't mind losing some information in the highlights just to get a little bit of that separation in my image, or to make something that's a little bit curious or, interesting. So with that being said, I appreciate it. I would love for you guys to give it a shot. Anybody's Black and White. Ben, thank you again for having me, and Peace out, guys.
Like I said, Gio goes by AnybodyShoots on Instagram and YouTube, so make sure to check out his work, watch some of his videos, give him a follow and a sub because his work is great. With that, let's move on to our last recipe, Fluorescent Nights. Fluorescent Nights. Like every other video in this series, I try to include a recipe perfect for night photography, and this recipe does a great job at that. This recipe by far is the most unique look out of all the recipes in this video. It has two very different looks depending on the lighting. In more natural night situations, I find it provides deep blues that feel really saturated and pop with a slight green tint in the shadows. As you introduce more artificial light, that green becomes stronger and stronger, often dominating the scene, making for a very stylized image. I really like shooting this recipe when there's a mix of different light sources. I find it creates a really unique color contrast. While the look and colors this recipe provides changes depending on the lights, one thing that doesn't change is the saturation. It's a very punchy feeling recipe, which some people may not like. It's definitely a unique styled recipe and it's not for everyone, but if you're shooting a lot at night, I think you'll really like this one. While you can use this recipe during the day, it just wasn't the look I preferred, and I much preferred how it performed during lower light situations. That being said, it can hurt to try, so give it a try and maybe you'll like it. And just like that, that's 5 recipes I think you should try on your Fujifilm camera. Like I said, this is the 10th video in this series, and I highly recommend checking out all the other videos. There are some really awesome recipes, and some you may have never even heard of before. There'll be a link in the description below to check it out. For now, go and shoot some photos. Thanks for watching.